not all of iRead It TV. Neva and Dylan are of iRead It TV, but David's here enough. You're an honorary member of iRead It TV. We've got David Cole back from Taki's magazine, a revisionist historian who is nothing but a load of laughs that we all love to have on. And we wanted to get him back on because there have been some results since one of our last conversations. We had been talking about the Hollywood apartheid, because in South Africa it's bad, in Alabama it's bad, but in Hollywood it's great. And there seems to have been a little bit of fallout that was more or less what you previously predicted. David, can you key us into what's going on?
Yes, well, I'll try to be a load of laughs. Normally I'm called a load of something else, but laughs, I'll take laughs.
They're not mutually exclusive. You can be both.
There was a system that was instituted in 2021. Now, they began, Hollywood and the streaming studios began looking into this in 2020, the year of George Floyd, and they formally instituted this system in 2021. And basically what it was, a quota and caps system on hiring based on race. White actors and white behind-the-scenes people were capped at a certain level, and black actors and black behind-the-scenes people were quoted so that there had to be a certain number of black people, and it was much higher than the percentage of black people in the U.S. population, and it was also much higher than the percentage of black people in the business. In other words, the quotas that were set for black hiring were so high that black actors began having to do double duty. In other words, there weren't enough black actors to fill all the damn quotas. My black friends who are actors, because most of my friends are in the business in some way, and my black friends who are actors were in 3-4 things at once, because Hollywood, the streaming studios, and by that I mean Netflix predominantly, but also Amazon Prime, Hulu, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, but Netflix predominantly. The reason Netflix predominantly is that out of all of those streamers, Netflix is the only one that has to rely on content solely. Amazon Prime does original movie content and series, but it also, Amazon offers all the other things Amazon does. Amazon is a marketplace. Disney Plus offers original content, but the Disney empire is also comprised of theme parks and the theatrical movies and the merchandising. So Netflix has the unique position of being only a streamer. It has nothing else to fall back on. So they're the ones who are going to take the hits in any kind of market shakeup first and worst, because they don't have anything else. Even if everybody stopped watching Disney Plus tomorrow, if they lost 95% of their subscribers, well, then Disney would just go back to what it was 5 years ago. It was doing fine. It was supporting itself fine on its other endeavors. So Netflix is always the canary in the coal mine on this. So these caps and quotas that limited the number of whites who could be employed and greatly inflated the figure of blacks who had to be employed, it was creating a lot of problems and headaches for Netflix. One of them being that when you limit the number of white actors, now this goes on behind the scenes as well, but let's just talk about actors, because those are the actors are the face of movies. Actors are what you all think of when you think of movies. You don't think of who's the editor, who's the key grip, who's the gaffer. You think of the actors and then the directors, but you think the actors always first and foremost. So when you cap the number of whites who can be in a particular movie or TV show, and at the same time, because you want to attract viewers, the whites who you can hire, you want them to be people with a certain amount of name recognition. See, there used to be a dynamic in the business where you would always hire a lead actor with name recognition, but then you would try to fit into that movie a newcomer, an actor, a young man or woman, usually a woman, but a man as well. It can be a young actor who's just starting out, who works for pennies, but you like them and you think they're going to be the next big thing. So you put them in your movie, and there's dozens and dozens, probably hundreds of examples of films where somebody got their launch, where some young performer got their big start, and they worked for nothing. They worked for just pure pennies, but the director, the producers had faith in them that they were going to be a big name eventually. So now that dynamic was upended because of the caps and quotas. Since let's say you could only hire one white person for any of the main roles in a film, in a series,
Then he better be a grade A white person.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's got to be a white person who can bring in the viewers. So all of a sudden, now that you are no longer hiring the ingenues, the young people who work for pennies, you're only hiring these white actors who have name recognition. Well, their salary demands skyrocket because they're the only game in town now. They are the white people who can be hired. Their agents know that. And so between them and their agents, they begin negotiating up. Whereas in previous, like for example, if we go back to the start of the recession in 2008, now we go back to the period where the economy began to tank and venture capitalists stopped putting money in independent films. So all of a sudden, there's not a lot of production going on, and everybody is trying to hire on the cheap. But what happened in 2008? Everyone's salaries start to go down. They start to go down because there's a million actors and nobody's getting hired. So even name actors are like, I'll cut my price in half. Just give me work. I need work. Now the opposite, because of the caps and quotas, the opposite is happening. The small number of whites who are allowed to be hired are raising their asking demands because they know they can't be replaced by nobody white actors because the streamers demand names, marquee names. Now, at the same time, the A-level white actors are raising their salary demands. The black actors, who have all the work in the world, they're not struggling for work, but they've been told that you can't pay a black person less than a white. That's pure KKK racism. So as the white salaries increased due to a restriction in that market, due to a shortage created of white actors, an artificial shortage, as the white actors' salaries increased, the black salaries increased as well because Netflix didn't want to be seen as paying blacks less than whites. So even though blacks, there was a glut of them.
This sounds like this sounds like a comedy script. Like, I feel 10 years ago we could have made a comedy show out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is really basic economics that anyone with half a brain who was not enslaved to this racial ideology, anybody could have seen this coming. So now you have Netflix in a very precarious position where they are paying white actors more than those actors are worth, and now they are paying the black actors way more than those black actors are worth because it's not the market demanding anymore. It's the actors inflating their salaries, and their agents, of course, are inflating the salaries because the agents make money when the actors make money. Now, complicating this is because the same thing's going on behind the scenes. There's a position in the business called the showrunner. The showrunner is the guy on any TV show or streaming series. The showrunner is the person who runs the whole thing. I mean, it's a self-explanatory term. The showrunner runs the show. They are the person they are in charge of overseeing the writers, overseeing the production. They're the big cheese. Now, blacks were being brought on as showrunners and writers, and these blacks had no experience doing this very complicated and demanding job. The small number of whites, and Jews are included in that figure because in the Netflix cap and quota system, Jews were counted as whites.
Oh.
So when I say whites in this context, that includes Jews as well. The few white showrunners and writers who were allowed to stay were needed to train all of these blacks with no experience who were being brought in because of the quotas. So now these white showrunners and these white writers could raise their rates because they were way more necessary now. They were the only skilled ones.
And now and then the blacks have to go up too for the same reason.
Exactly. And where Netflix found itself before the crash that happened a couple of weeks ago, this is an astounding figure, guys. This would have been an astounding figure at any time in human history since movies began being made. Last year, Netflix found itself, its entire budget for all of its original programming, its movies and its streaming series, was over $14 billion for original programming. That's an astoundingly high figure. That is when you consider that typically you can turn out a good movie for 10 million. You can turn out a good streaming series for 10 million, anywhere from 5 to 20 million, basically. So you can do the math about 14 billion is a lot of money. And compounding all of this is that all of these new black writers and showrunners who had no experience, and all of these actors who did not necessarily have any name recognition, no one was tuning in to see a lot of this original content. Netflix suffered a 67% drop in page views this quarter, for the first quarter of 2022. 67% drop in page views and a projected 2.4 million loss of subscribers.
And then Nima's just pointing up here. Am I reading that right? That the stock price went from 700 to 166?
Yeah, it tanked. It tanked in an instant, and it was a shock to the system of everyone. A lot of these investors in Netflix who believed this was the way of the future. Now, granted,
I'm sorry, that Netflix was the way of the future, or the racial apartheid was the way of the future?
Oh, streaming in general.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't disagree with him there.
The supplemental issues, there are a few smaller issues surrounding the crash. One of them, of course, is the end of the pandemic. But people haven't been locked down for a while now. I mean, it is not like I know a lot of my leftist friends here in LA are still acting like there's a lockdown. I still have one or two friends.
They're still doing that here too. Yeah.
Yeah,
there's still people playing Pandemic in certain places.
Yes, LARPing.
But generally speaking, the end of the pandemic would not have created these first quarter numbers. These first quarter 2022 numbers really are not connected to the pandemic ending. That would have affected Netflix last year in terms of just the general population. So what you have is not so much the pandemic, and Netflix also tried to blame it on Russia initially, because nowadays that's an easy out for anyone to just blame everything on Russia. But that didn't hold up either when people really started to get into these numbers, started to look at not just the stock tanking, but the page view, where all of these subscribers who are canceling and all of this dip in page views, it hit primarily the parts of the world where where European standards of beauty are traditionally held.
Mm-hmm.
The Netflix tanked hardest in the United States, Europe, and Latin America. Anybody who knows Latin American media knows that there's probably no more racially segregated kind of media than Latin America. They love blondes. They love white features. I mean, there is a lot of legitimate beefs by indigenous people in places like Mexico and Venezuela and the Andean countries because these tiny little brown indigenous people, they want to be news readers, they want to be anchor women, weathermen, things like that. You can't get a job there if you look like, if you look like that.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the countries that, and the regions where Netflix most tanked hardest. But interestingly enough, Netflix even tanked in places where they had been pandering. For example, Netflix, and some people have realized this just looking at their suggestions on Netflix over the past year. Netflix had been bringing in a lot of Indian movies. I would notice this. Like I would be.
I did that too. There was like
movies.
Indian and Pakistan. You see like a lot of thumbnails where it's like the main actor is a Sikh wearing a turban, and you're like, what? Where did this come from?
Yeah. And I would be looking through the horror movie section of Netflix to see if there's anything new. And all of a sudden, I'd see a whole row of like Pang Nong, Ching Chow, Wacham Chong, and that's more Chinese sounding.
We got your point.
All I can do in Indian is the accent, but I don't really know anything about the language. That didn't work at all because it turned out the Indians, they can see Indian media on their own TV. They don't need to subscribe to Netflix to see Indian media. They want to see Game of Thrones. They want to see stuff.
They want to see the white people.
They want to see the white people in Europe doing European things, or they don't want to see, because now Netflix, because of this quota where they have to cast blacks, they're doing these Elizabethan dramas with all black people. Anne Boleyn now looks like she's a Ubangi warrior. They're doing all of this stuff that they have to do because of the caps and quota system. But when that crash happened 2 weeks ago, Nima put the stats up there. When the crash happened, what I'm sensing, now Netflix has not specifically said this, and I don't think they will because they don't want to open up a hornet's nest, but they have been firing a lot of last year's diversity hires. Now, the main way you see that is there's now an entire portion of Twitter that is just dedicated to Netflix diversity hires who have been fired. And they tweet each other and retweet each other. They're trying to get work. And they're all bitching. They're all complaining about the same thing. About they brought me in last summer and they promised me a life-changing amount of money, and then just like that, they've cast me to the curb.
Clown world. This is such clown world. Keep going. This is just clown world.
Yeah, and what's funny, in their Twitter bios, they all identify themselves by their identity: proud black woman, stunning Filipina, brown woman with talent, black brilliance at work. And so you can tell by these hundreds and hundreds of streams on Twitter that the first people being fired are those overpaid diversity hires. Now, Netflix hasn't said anything publicly about doing this. They haven't said anything publicly about stopping the cap and quota system. Now, I want to tell you guys a quick anecdote that I haven't been able to tell anywhere else. I didn't have space for it in my column. I teased it in my column.
Oh boy!
But I didn't have space for it. But here's one of the most ridiculous examples of how bad the cap and quota system got. And this is from last summer, about July of last year. Part of the cap and quota system wasn't just for blacks. It was also for transgender.
I remember talking about this. Yes.
The streamers had to bring in a certain number of trannies. Now, this created a big problem because, and I'm saying this as a guy who has been in casting since my first casting gig was 1986, a long time. There's certain things you can find a lot of at any point in Hollywood, and gays especially. If you want to find gay men, Hollywood is where you go. It is full of them, and always has been, like Broadway. It is just how the business works, and God bless them. But in terms of trannies, there are not a lot of them. And what few trannies there are out here tend to be the grotesque ones, the ones you would find in the Biden administration, the ones you would find overseeing pandemic restrictions in 2020, those ghastly looking monsters under the bed. Now, what Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime were looking for, they were looking for pretty trannies. They were looking for trannies that were not hard on the eyes. Here's how I come into this anecdote. Okay, so I'm sitting around, this is like last July. Everybody that I work with in the indie film business or elsewhere, yes, it's exactly.
Totally a woman.
Everyone I work with, and this is exactly the kind of tranny that you don't want to cast, because nobody's going to want to see that for 2 hours or follow that.
Or 2 seconds. I'm already, my eyes are burning already, Nima.
Yeah, it's bad. So what people know about my work in casting predominantly is I'm using this. No one calls me this, but if they were, they would call me the bimbo whisperer, because I have a knack in corralling and helping dumb young actresses get work. I know how to speak to them. I know how to get them looking good on camera, even if they don't have a lot of experience. And people often come to me if they need a particular bimbo for a particular role. An actress is very good looking, but who can handle herself on camera, and who's not going to throw a fit and be a prima donna, or be so stupid that she sets herself on fire the first day of shooting. So a friend of mine, and I'm not going to say his name for privacy's sake, but a friend of mine who's beginning producing a streaming series, comes to me with a problem. They have found, and again, this is my term, not theirs, they have found the unicorn tranny. A unicorn because it's a guy to girl tranny who actually is attractive.
Like, you got to look for the Adam's apple to know that it's a guy, sort of attractive.
Well, I hadn't seen this tranny yet, but it is being explained to me that this is an attractive tranny, 18 and a half years old, and no one can get this tranny hired. Well, I'm saying, well, wait a minute, you're offering money, right? Oh yeah, we're offering money, but Dave, we need your help. We don't know how to approach this tranny. I say, well, why the hell do you think I know how to approach a tranny? I've never approached a tranny in
Dave,
my life.
we need Dave's help here. Help us figure out how to approach the trannies. Yes.
But they thought that because I have a good steady hand with bimbos, with actress bimbos, that maybe I could. So I said, okay, first of all, show me the tranny.
Show me the tranny. Yes.
So they send me the tranny's headshots and some homemade video from the tranny. I will say this. From a distance, this tranny might have fooled me briefly. I mean, I actually might have thought this was a woman. It's a decent tranny. If any of your viewers ever saw The Crying Game back in the 90s, now the person in The Crying Game was not a tranny, it was a gay man, but it was a gay man who was very feminine looking, and you're supposed to believe for the whole first part of the movie that it's a woman. This tranny was better than The Crying Game person. So this was a decent tranny. Probably one of the few I'd ever seen that didn't make me want to retch. And I said, okay, for my fee, because I don't do this stuff for free, for my fee, I will try to land you this tranny.
There's an additional tranny tax.
Yes. And I get a certain amount of money just for doing it, but then I would get a bonus if I can actually land the tranny.
Mm-hmm.
So I get in touch with the tranny and I say, so and so sent me. I'm a casting director in LA. First of all, this tranny's not in Southern California. This tranny's not in California at all. This tranny is on the East Coast. So the first goal is to try to get the tranny out here and get the tranny interested in doing this particular streaming series. So I have a few email and Zoom interactions with the tranny. I have the tranny do a couple of monologue readings for me, and and this is I forget the name of the actor from the Crying Game, but it was Jay something. I don't know my glasses.
Yeah, there it is, Jay Davidson. Jay Davidson.
And I believe he got a Best Supporting Actor nomination, if I'm not mistaken. But a lot of people went through the whole movie fooled, and I will tell you that my unicorn tranny is mixed race, just like Jay Davidson is. So maybe there is something about being mixed race, little black, little Asian, little white.
That's confusing to the senses.
Yes, exactly. It releases some kind of gas that muddles the mind, some kind of Doctor Strange kind of thing. So my unicorn tranny was better than this. I'll say that much. And worse still, worse, especially for my friends who were willing to pay top dollar for this tranny, the unicorn tranny was a good actor. Now, when I say that's worse is because now my friends were really interested in getting this tranny out here.
They're desperate.
Because not only was the tranny good looking and young, but could act. So they told me, they said, offer her to him, but I got to be respectful. Offer her carte blanche. Now, I'm overstating what happened next. I'm overstating for comic effect. But this is basically what happened. I would make these offers to the tranny. Here's what they'll give you for salary. They'll put you up in this hotel. And the tranny would be like, yeah, but will they pay me in dicks? Like, well, they'll give you a lot of money.
And you could go buy dicks.
And money can buy dicks. No, but I want dicks. What it came down to is, here was the problem they faced. Doesn't matter how good looking or talented this tranny was, trannies have issues.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be trannies.
And this particular, plus, this is an 18-and-a-half-year-old man. Doesn't matter how feminine it looks. It's still a man.
Right.
They're horny. 18-year-old boys are horny. They are defined by their horniness. This tranny just wanted to have sex. This tranny didn't care about fame. This tranny did not care about being in the movie.
He didn't care about money?
Did not care about coming to LA. This tranny wanted dicks. And there was nothing I could offer. Obviously I'm not going to become a pimp, and I'm not going to say, well, I'll round you up. You tell me what kind of guy you want.
How many in what description? Okay, yeah. Got it.
This tranny was perfectly happy out on the East Coast with a lot of, if you're into trannies, this is the tranny to be into, because it is a real good-looking tranny. And this tranny had no desire. It didn't matter what we offered it. My friends and I didn't get my bonus because I was unable to land the unicorn tranny, so I don't get my bonus. And all I get out of it is an anecdote, which is now I finally get to tell the story. But it's indicative of what happened with these quotas.
Well, but before you get into that, I'm still on the anecdote. So he couldn't do it, and you couldn't communicate to him that I am offering you what you want. There's just one more step in between.
Yeah. I would say things like, I would say things like, there are so many good-looking boys out here in LA. Come out here.
That will flock to you if you're a famous actor. Yeah.
And this is a big liberal city. You're going to be welcomed wherever you go. You're going to fit in. Nobody's going to shun you. No Archie bunkers out here. We're welcoming. You could be doing commercials, advertisements. Every company out here that's trying, like Gillette and all those companies that do tranny commercials. My gosh, everyone will want to sign you. But it is like trying to, what I liken it to? There was a movie from the 80s called The Gods Must Be Crazy.
I've seen that one.
Okay, yeah, and it had Kalahari Bushmen in it. The the white South African filmmaker who made the film, Jamie Ois, he knew these Bushmen because he had done documentaries about them. So when he went to the Bushmen and tried to explain that he wanted to put them in a film where they would act, they didn't understand the concept of acting, but he knew them enough. They do tell stories. Bushmen tell stories to their children. So he could explain a little bit about what a movie is and how they would simply be telling a story to many children around the world through this camera, through this lens. But he couldn't explain the concept of money to them. He had to negotiate something, what they would be paid. But what do you pay a Bushman? The Bushmen don't use our type of currency.
Well, I remember specifically in that movie, there's a scene where the Bushman gets paid money and he just throws it away because he doesn't know what to do with it. Yeah.
Exactly. Because there's and the actor, I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's like Wow or something like that. But you can only pay a Bushman in food and the things that they require. So it's very similar to dealing with this tranny. This 18-and-a-half-year-old tranny just wanted dicks. And even as much as I explained how money can buy many dicks, that it didn't register because she is apparently doing quite well on the East Coast and just saw no need to wake up at 5 a.m. to get into makeup, to go on set and work for 20 hours, do all the things that actors have to do.
When I'm already getting dicks, why would I bother?
She's neck deep in dicks. So what can Hollywood offer? And it's a real shame. This person could have had a career. And I'm telling you, when I told this unicorn tranny story to my white actor friends who were not working at all, and they heard about how this tranny could write its own ticket, but didn't see the value in it, didn't see the need to. And the worst part is, I get the feeling that at some point, however many, if this tranny lives, because trannies, they're so high risk in so much of this stuff.
41%.
Yeah, but there might be a point later in this tranny's life. They're no longer 18. They don't look good anymore. They're like, well, now I'll try to get into films. Well, guess what, bucko? You missed your boat.
I mean, if I was telling him, you may have tried this in the negotiation where it's like, look, if you want to continue to have dicks when they're no longer easy, you could use the money. I don't know if you did that or not, but that's what I would have negotiated.
Well, it can't be that direct because you don't want to be accused of a hate crime. That's the problem. When you're dealing with a person like this, you say the wrong thing, you misgender them, or you say something that's insulting. Next thing you know, my face could be back in the Hollywood Reporter, this time for not being a Holocaust revisionist, but for being a transphobe.
But which is worse, Dave? Which is worse?
Yeah. Because I don't cast as David Cole because that name is poisonous and you can't have that on a film. So I don't want my casting persona to be in the Hollywood Reporter because that'll cut off a whole line of work for me. So I have to be very careful. But one of the things, like you were just suggesting, Dylan, one of the things I was trying to explain is it's a good investment for your future. Come out, make a couple million now, invest in some real estate, have all the dicks you want, but invest in something that 10 years from now will be a good nest egg for you. But nothing could. And she was very friendly. I mean, it was a perfectly all the. They must have had six back and forth, 6 or 7, very friendly, but absolutely not interested in what this industry was selling.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this is the tranny version of integrity. It's like the version of if in an old school movie, this would be the blue collar white guy in the mining town who doesn't want to leave the coal mine to go to Hollywood,
Right.
because this is
Because
where
it's too degenerate over there. Yeah.
my dad mined these hills. My granddad mined these hills. The love of my life is here. And she's teaching the kids this town. This is where I belong. This town, this little West Virginia town is where I belong. And this is the tranny version of that. Being on the East Coast surrounded by dicks is where she belongs. And it just ended. I mean, we got our final no. And I had to tell my friend, I said, oh, there's nothing more I can say to this tranny. This tranny is not interested. And we tried our best. And that was reflected in many similar stories where they could not find, like Netflix and Amazon Prime and their casting directors could not find even remotely enough transgender people. There was something, the figures for Amazon Prime, which are so ridiculous, are a minimum of 15% of the actors have to be transgender.
15?
In a
15?
movie or,
Wow.
15. In any movie or TV show, you're talking about a percentage of the population that is in like 0.0. If you they try to inflate it, but it's points. It's always point something, and you want to get 15% of your cast as trannies. That's just not going to happen. The people aren't there to fill those quotas. I had a white actor friend. Again, I won't say the name for obvious reasons when you hear the story. I had a white actor friend who just decided to pretend to be tranny. It was the only way.
I suggested that last time. I suggested that in the last conversation. Why don't you just identify to be black or identify to be gay?
Yeah.
Or tranny or whatever.
But the thing about tranny is people are so scared to ask follow-up questions.
I'm a girl.
It's very easy
I'm a girl.
to identify as.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you misgender me, I'm calling the ADL. I'm calling
the Social Democrats of America.
Yeah.
They're all going to wave their hands like this at you.
Yeah. You're going to get the anger jazz hands. So I had a friend who actually tried that, and it worked initially, except he just couldn't keep going with the ruse.
Yeah, it just I thought, like, oh my God, I just can't handle this. Yeah.
It is. He preferred just keeping his minimum wage job. There was at least dignity in that. There was at least dignity in what he was doing to earn a living and to scrape by. Now everyone's kind of on pins and needles about whether these caps and quotas will officially be dropped or not.
That leads to my next question. So Netflix just appears, I don't know if imploding is the right word or 80% imploding or whatever. It's doing badly. And then even if these other streamers like Amazon Prime and Disney Plus, they can fall back on their other business. But if the streaming platform itself implodes, are we looking at a streaming holocaust, David?
A streamacost.
Are we looking at a streamacost? Is there something new that can come out of this? Are they going to look at themselves in the mirror and go, "This is a really bad idea"? Is this a great time for someone new to come out in the market and go, "Well, we're not going to do that. We'll just take all the customers"?
Well, what you'll certainly be looking at is a reorganization of the business model. Part of Netflix's business model that they will probably be abandoning is they would, and this was a big complaint among their subscriber base, Netflix would start a new show, develop a loyal base for it, and then cancel it after 2 or 3 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Because in their mindset, they wanted to get new subscribers. To hell with the old subscribers. There was a sense of screw the people who are already subscribing. What are they going to do? Cancel? Well, yeah, it turned out they were canceling in great numbers because Netflix was not showing loyalty to the pre-existing subscribers. Their attitude was, you subscribe because of this show, we're canceling that show. And let's see you leave. Well, they were leaving. Another problem that Netflix is facing is the increased competition from Paramount and Disney and all the production companies that have their own library of stuff. Back when Netflix was through the mail only, back when that was their thing before they got into streaming, the thing I like, and I'm going back with like 2002, 2003 now, the thing I liked about Netflix back then is they had a massive catalog of older stuff. And so for film buffs like me, and I tend to like the stuff in the 70s and 80s, you could just keep watching and watching and watching. When Netflix moved over to streaming and moved over to original content as its main drawing point, and then Amazon Prime kind of did the same, although Amazon Prime still has a much better catalog of older stuff. But when it all became all about new stuff, you had to do two things. You had to, number one, you had to hook people with dynamic programming that became must-see. Oh my God, Orange is the New Black. I'm trying to think of a Netflix one that was. Anyway,
Marco Polo.
House of Cards. Well, House of Cards.
Yeah.
was a big Netflix draw.
Stuff where people talk about, oh my gosh, did you see that episode? Did you see that? So you've got to hook them with new things, but also you've got to keep them because you don't want them to there was twice I've subscribed to Hulu just to watch one thing.
And then unsubscribed?
In the 30-day trial period. Like there was on Hulu in 2020, there was a mini series about the McDonald's McMillions contest. I don't know if you guys seen it. I think it was called McMillions. Anyway, back in 2001, there was a big scandal where the McDonald's Monopoly game was hijacked by criminals, and they stole all the millions. And I'd heard a lot about this mini series. It was like, I think, a 10-part or 12-part series called McMillions. And I wanted to see it. It was only available on Hulu. So I subscribed to Hulu, binged the whole thing, and then canceled. I've done that twice. That's the problem. If you don't have a lot of stuff continually coming that people want to see,
then they do what you just did.
Yeah. And I recommend McMillions highly, by the way. It's not just an inside look at a caper that was brilliantly carried out. A caper that started with a simple accident. It was and I don't want to give anything away. Oh, it's only 6 parts. I don't want to give anything away, but the great thing about it is you learn through the series, you learn that the whole caper began with one thing that was mailed to the wrong guy. And it all started like that. Nobody put their heads together and said, how can we break McDonald's with this heist? A guy got a thing in the mail that he shouldn't have got. And it was like, I could do a hell of a heist with this. And that's how it started. It's a great inside look at the FBI also. And the funny thing about it, people would say, how come I never heard about this scandal? This should have been big news. And the reason the McMillions scandal was not a big deal, the FBI announced it on September 10th, 2001.
Oh, that'll do it.
So, yeah. And everyone, obviously everyone the next day forgot about it for the rest of the year. I really recommend it highly, and it is worth signing up for Hulu for 1 month. If you don't have Hulu, it's worth doing it. If it is still on Hulu, I don't know if it's been pulled by now. But my point being, what Netflix was not doing was creating a lot of watchable content. They were creating all of this politically correct stuff and all of this stuff where all the actors kind of looked the same, and then they were bringing in all that Indian content, and they weren't giving people a reason to stick around. And they weren't creating any kind of customer loyalty by giving stuff to the longtime customers who enjoyed a certain series and didn't want to see it end suddenly. They weren't doing fan service. They were very blasé, almost mercenary about how screw the people who've already subscribed. Let's just get the new blood. And now with this bloodbath of lost subscriptions and this bloodbath of a decrease in page views, everyone's reorganizing. Disney is the safest of all the streamers because the Disney classics, and I'm not talking about the new politically correct crap that they're doing now. The Disney classics are timeless. Everybody with kids will have their kids watch The Lion King and The Little Mermaid, and then the older classic, Snow White and 101 Dalmatians. These things never die. And the thing about kids is they always want to see the same crap over and over and over again. That's why the youth entertainment market has never suffered, because kids don't get bored. Just the opposite. Kids want familiarity. I want to see Snow White. I want to see Snow White. But you've seen Snow White 50 times. I know. I want to see Snow White. They like to know the lines. They like to be familiar with the lines in a way that's the child's mind learning the beauty of becoming familiar with things. I mean, this is a healthy thing in mankind that, in theory, would translate to as we get older and we go to college, university, we want to learn stuff, become familiar with how to wire a computer, how to build a furnace or whatever the hell. Nowadays, that's been subverted because you go to college just to learn gender ideology. But in the good old days,
you learn Marxism too. Hey.
I'm always the first one to say that it is not a thing of shame for me that I don't even have a high school diploma. I learned on my own in this life. But kids love that familiarity of seeing something they've already seen and even discovering new details about it. So Disney's going to be fine. Amazon is encountering various problems. They had a dip in their streaming, but they also are encountering problems with their workforce, with unionizing. They should survive because everyone I know, even people who don't like Amazon, and that's rightists and leftists. I have a lot of leftist friends who don't like Amazon because of their anti-union policies, but everybody uses Amazon. It's almost impossible now to not use Amazon. So these other services are going to be okay with this shakeup. Netflix is the one that has the major problem on its hands. So some of the things that they're trying to do, they're thinking of offering a very low subscription rate that would be ad-based.
Oh, so yeah, I'll sign up for that. Get real. Yeah. Whose idiot came up with that crap?
Probably the same people who came
I'm not willing to spend $10 a month for the shit that you're trying to give me now. But if it's $2 a month and I have to watch ads on top of the shit, yeah, I'll do that. What? Sorry, please continue.
What happens is kind of an interesting side note to that, because what happens when you do that ad-based content, now YouTube has been trying that. I don't know if you guys remember, but like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, YouTube tried YouTube Red.
I do remember that. I didn't. Tell us.
YouTube was going to get into original programming, and they were going to offer a subscriber service that was going to rival Netflix. To their credit, YouTube Red had one good idea, and that was Cobra Kai, the Karate Kid reboot. That was a YouTube Red show that ended up being bought out by Netflix. But it started its very first season was on YouTube Red, and you had to pay for YouTube Red to see the first season of Cobra Kai. It was a dynamic start to YouTube Red, but what YouTube found out, unfortunately, is they couldn't compete. Netflix at the time, we're going back now 4 years. Netflix at the time was a powerhouse. They could buy out anybody. The producers of Cobra Kai got lured away by Netflix. Like, here's $1 billion more if you leave YouTube Red. So there was YouTube Red losing its Cadillac, and they tried to go to ad-supported movies. They would get Hollywood films, but there'd be advertisements throughout them.
Just like back when you're watching stuff on TV and there'd be like 5 minutes of show and 10 minutes of ads. Oh God, I don't miss those times.
What was even worse about it is once you start doing that ad-supported business model, the advertisers begin having demands. They don't want their ads appearing among a lot of like violence or bad words or homophobic.
Yeah, I don't want my ad in that movie, and this guy's like, I don't want my ad in that movie, and then it becomes this labyrinth. Yeah.
So for YouTube would start running these movies on YouTube Red, ad supported, and all of the foul language or violence would be edited out. My favorite example of that, a couple of years ago, I tried watching, just to see what they had done to it, I tried watching the Coen brothers film Fargo on YouTube, ad supported. Now, Fargo, the way it was made, has, I think, a record number of fucks in it. And the advertisers didn't want all those fucks. So watching Fargo, they had replaced every F word with the word Frusen to try to make it seem like some North Dakota, some kind of frozen North catchphrase. So you have like Steve Buscemi's characters like, Jerry, I'm not going to argue with you about this Frusen deal. Now, if you want me to kidnap your Frusen wife, then you better Frusen come up with the money. So that failed, obviously. And YouTube, now what YouTube's trying to do, they're still trying to offer a subscription service. They don't call it Red anymore. I don't know what the name is, but now they're trying to offer like live sporting events and like local channels to replace broadcast TV. It ain't gonna work. Nobody's gonna pay for that. I don't know why they're still even trying. So for YouTube, the dream of streaming is dead. We have to see what's going to happen with Netflix. It's uncharted territory. It's why there's only so much I can really prognosticate about it, because very much is uncharted. We don't know to what extent they're going to finally abandon the caps and quotas. We don't know to what extent they're going to start to, if they get rid of the racial quotas and caps and just bring in people who are willing to work cheap. If they can take that $14 billion in original programming, do a year just on $1 billion. If you bring the right people in, you can get 20 streaming series for $1 billion. But you have to bring the right people in who can work cheap. And you have to hire actors not based on race and not artificially inflating their salaries. Hire actors who are good, but also hire actors who are newcomers. Hire the pretty ladies out there. The hardest hit demographic group by these caps and quotas has been young white women. This is the group hardest hit because this is the group that traditionally benefits from their looks, not their experience. From the beginning of Hollywood, from the earliest days, there are stories of a producer going into a soda shop, and there's a pretty blonde
and you just take her
off the bus.
Yeah.
Just off the bus from Iowa, and Sammy Schoenstein goes up to her and says, "Hey, sweetie, how'd you like to be at the movies?" That's been happening since the start of the business. So young white girls are the ones traditionally hired just because of how they look. So when you ban the way they look, that's it. They're gone. Start hiring pretty girls again. Start hiring based on talent and not race, and bring in showrunners and writers who are not coming into. That's another thing. What happened with these black writers they brought in? These black writers had been told by everyone they've ever met in the business, "Oh, you're perfect. Speak your truth. Speak your voice." Whereas previously, when race was not an issue, writers would be counseled differently. They would be said, find out what's going to work. Get an idea that you think could connect with the public.
And they'd be criticized if it was bad too, right? Like,
right.
If someone's like, I don't think this is going to work. I don't think it's a good idea. As opposed to, oh man, whatever you say is great because you're black.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So all of these black writers couldn't take criticism, and people were afraid to give it to them, and because everybody knew if you get attacked as being a racist in this business, you're done. You're finished. So these black writers were turning out crap. Norm Macdonald tells a story. One of Norm Macdonald's earliest gigs was writing for the Roseanne Barr show in the late 1980s, early 90s. And so Norm was just a writer back then. He wasn't known as a stand-up yet. He wasn't known as a personality. Norm Macdonald just was a writer. And Roseanne Barr was one of the first people to give him work, probably the first person to give him major work, and that's why he stayed loyal to her even when she had her problems. So the writing staff of the Roseanne Barr show was all white back then, late 80s, early 90s, and they wanted to bring in a black writer. They wanted to try to, the network was saying, we'll diversify a little bit. So they bring in this black writer. Norm never named him, but I have an idea who it might be. They bring in this black writer. And if you remember, the Roseanne Barr show, it's about this blue-collar white family. And it was really based on Roseanne Barr's humor. John Goodman played the husband. And it's blue-collar white. That's what the show is about. This is Norm's story, and I'm not doing it justice by telling it for him. But of course, he'd be the first to make the joke that he can't tell the story anymore. The story goes basically that they're asking this black writer for ideas. They're just sitting around the writer's table, just informally pitching ideas, which is how it used to work back then. And the black guy said, I got an idea. When you're wearing your do-rag and your bitch takes it and wipes her pussy with it. Then gives you your do-rag back and you're like, I ain't wearing this motherfucking do-rag. It smells like pussy. Everyone at the writer's table was like, no, we don't actually
never had that experience before.
Yeah. And that's what you got a lot of with Netflix and the cap and quotas. You got a lot of writers sitting right. They all get that joke. Yeah, man, the do-rag and the pussy and the do-rag and the pussy. And it's not going to connect with viewers, and it's not going to connect with anyone but a really small number of people. The value of true diverse hiring, which is when you hire based on talent, and the person could be black, the person could be white, and if it turns out to be 20 white people and one black person, or half Asian, half white, or whatever, if you hire on talent, what you get is a writer's room where people are synthesizing ideas, and it all kind of, something good comes out of it because they just kind of workshop their ideas. And it's one of the things that you hear a lot of in the business is where like somebody has one idea. Like you guys remember one of Chris Farley's classic sketches on SNL, maybe the one he's most remembered for is Living in a Van Down by the River. That started as something totally different. That was originally written for Chris Farley by Bob Odenkirk when they were both in improv together.
Odenkirk of Better Call Saul.
Yep. Correct. Yeah, who started off doing improv comedy and then sketch comedy, and has managed to create an actual acting career for himself from that. The Odenkirk wrote for Saturday Night Live briefly. Odenkirk initially wrote this for Farley, and the character was originally a coach, a locker room coach, trying to give a pep talk to the players. Odenkirk and Farley workshopped it together. Is the two guys thinking, okay, well, what do we tweak? What do we tweak? And it ended up coming out as Matt Foley, the motivational speaker, the sketch that really made Farley legendary on the show. That's what you get when writers, when writers just kind of think about, okay, we both have ideas. How do we make it funny? One other really good example, Back to the Future, the movie, is a great example because Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, two guys who created the idea, they both just had kind of a bare bones of a story, something to do about going back in time and meeting your parents. But they didn't have any of it worked out. And they went to Steven Spielberg, who they knew this a long time ago, this in the late 70s, early 80s, and they said, we got this idea. And he was like, well, workshop it out so that you come back with something that is audience pleasing and kind of makes sense and has a narrative. So when you stop hiring writers based on who works well together, who can workshop together, who can churn out these ideas, and you just hire based on color, you just hire based on skin color, so you get a room full of people with the pussy do-rag and nobody to tell them, well, maybe that's not going to connect with viewers. You get what Netflix got. And the big question is, where does Netflix go from now? Again, I can't really say. We can do this show again in 3 months' time, and we'll probably have a really good idea. I do think we're just going to see a very slow and steady dismantling of the apartheid cap and quota system. I don't think it's going to be flashy. I don't think you're going to see headlines in the trade papers that it's being abandoned, but it will be abandoned just very sub rosa until it just doesn't exist anymore. So in a certain number of months, we'll meet again here, talk about it again, and we'll see if I'm right. But I think it will be abandoned. I just don't think it'll be in any way flashy. But I think Netflix has to. They are dying, and they are in a corner, and the only way out is to abrogate everything they did last year, to just pretend that 2001 didn't exist and do the opposite of it. Just everything that didn't work last year, do the exact opposite of that. If they're smart, that's what they'll do. Unless they're suicidal, unless they just want to become copies of that.
I saw a not a meme, but a repost of a tweet, and unfortunately I can't remember if it was Netflix. I think it was Netflix, and it was like the head of the HR department, this young, attractive woman, writing something to the effect of, I need to have less white people in my life. Openly tweeting that. And if that's the head of HR...
That was Dropbox.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah, that is... her last name is Friedel. Something Friedel. And yeah, she actually, when that Lips of TikTok took that viral, and she liquidated her entire social media in real time. I remember looking at her tweets as they vanished, which is always funny. Whenever I've seen that happen, that's always hilarious when you're like watching a thread in real time and you see people liquidating their accounts. That is a story yet to be concluded, because people were going to Dropbox and complaining. And the thing that made it interesting is, and she was the head of HR, and she specifically said in some of her tweets that have been screenshot, so they're not going to die. She has said that she was hiring not just based on race, but also not based on representation. In other words, she said, I don't care if a particular group is overrepresented. If they're non-white, I'm going to hire them still. Now, that is exactly what happened with the Netflix and Amazon Prime caps and quotas. Blacks have been overrepresented in Hollywood since about 2001. That was the first time that the LA Times began crunching the numbers and doing a yearly recap. The LA Times, Jasmine Friedel. There you go. And yes, and all of these were screenshot. I mean, her feed is dead. She's off of Twitter, but everybody took screenshots of all of this. And I was gonna write about her, but I actually emailed her. I haven't heard back. I always like it when I can have interaction between these people.
What's a URM?
What's that?
Go back to the other tweet, Nima. She says she prefers BIPOC, by people of color, and URM.
Underrepresented minority.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But there, one of her exchanges was between an Indian guy, Bhagwan Chaganong or whatever, and he says, "I'd like to be hired, but I'm not underrepresented. Indians are overrepresented in this field. Would you still prioritize me?" And she says, "Yes, I will still prioritize you because it's not about representation; it's about being non-white." So that's a very specific one that I screenshotted myself before she liquidated her account, and very against the law. I mean, what it is to say that you're specifically hiring not even on representation but just on color is actually a violation of federal law. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. What I got from her, looking at her background, I went way back in her feed, and she has many personal issues. She's got
how could she not?
of personal issues. That's one of the reasons I wanted to write about her. I found her to be so broken as a human that I thought she was a really interesting test case. But I'm hoping still to hear back from her because I enjoy it when I.
Well, I guess I derailed us by remembering the wrong person for Netflix. But just a side note here, somebody who has that level of personal issues becoming the head of a very large company's HR department, and then I presume she's still there. Like, isn't the HR department to make sure that you get protected from people's personal issues, and you're head of the HR department it's nothing but a projection of personal. Yeah, just.
Well,
yeah, I think
just commiserating on the clown world.
We just have this situation where there's incompetence all over the place due to ideology, basically. Too much focus on ideology.
Yeah.
A lot of the focus on the product and on the quality has sort of disappeared. Like what you were talking about earlier, David, is how different writers and different actors and writers would just get together and come up with ideas and go back and forth and improve them. That whole process seems to have gotten lost in today's environment, and specifically with Netflix. What I thought was interesting about Netflix is macroeconomically, they were initially a distributor of film, so that was their business focus. And then they did this vertical extension towards production very quickly, and I never really understood why that was necessary. Why couldn't they focus on the distribution and let the production be done by those who've been good at it for decades, such as Disney and all the other ones? Why did they have to start becoming their own streaming service and then create this awkward situation for everyone now where, okay, now I need a Netflix subscription and a Disney subscription and another subscription? Just doesn't seem to be sustainable in the long term.
Well, the reason they did it, because it's a great point, Nima, and the reason they did it was when they were just distributors. And if you go back, get to that period in 2003 when they were just sending you DVDs in the mail, and they would just be the middle person between other people's content and you. When they were just distributors, they were always at the mercy of the parent companies of that content, taking their content back for their own streamer. In other words, Netflix realized at a certain point that the only way they could maintain a unique place in the market was to have their own content, because all of a sudden you had Disney taking back its content. There was a point in 2004, if you wanted to order any Disney films through Netflix, they were offered through Netflix. Similar NBC stuff and Paramount stuff. So when Netflix began to feel the squeeze of other companies, long-standing content creating Canadian companies like Disney saying, we're going to start our own streamer and we're going to take back our stuff from you. Netflix got frightened and they were like, well, the only way we can prevent losing all of our content is making our own unique copyrighted content that nobody else can take from us. So that was part of it. But also, ever since HBO got on the map in the late 1990s with original programming, because HBO also was something when HBO started in the 1980s, HBO simply showed other people's content. HBO was simply the cable movie channel that showed movies that other people made. But then throughout the 1990s, HBO began experimenting with putting money into making its own stuff. And then they got The Sopranos in the late 90s. They hit on The Sopranos, and it went through the roof. And all of a sudden, you had a cable network winning Emmy Awards. And if you'll remember, the HBO slogan, HBO's original slogan from the 1980s was HBO people don't miss out, which meant if you get HBO, you'll get all the movies in the world. But then once The Sopranos began going through the roof, HBO's slogan became, it's not TV, it's HBO. And it was a way of saying, we're a production studio. We're not a TV. We're just not TV. We're making high class quality production. So you can trace the germination of the Netflix business model back to HBO breaking out of the cycle of simply being a movie channel that distributes other people's movies and getting on the map first with The Sopranos and then all the other HBO series. And then Showtime began doing its own series. And it's a matter of prestige and having a franchise. Now, HBO, though, they were a lot smarter. Like when they had The Sopranos, they didn't want to let it go. Unlike Netflix, that would have canceled The Sopranos after season 3 because they were like, okay, now we don't care about these longtime fans of The Sopranos. We want new subscribers. HBO stretched out The Sopranos for damn near a decade, longer than David Chase, the producer, the showrunner, longer than he wanted it to be on the air. But HBO was smarter that way. They were like, we've got all these hardcore Sopranos fans. Yeah, we're going to get a couple of weak seasons out of it, forcing it to stretch like that. But it was a smarter business move to keep that cash cow going for almost a decade. Maybe Netflix will go back and learn those lessons about keeping the long-term fan-based shows and doing the fan service that is so big in the industry, whether it's Marvel and DC fan service. Everybody talks about it these days. You don't spit in the face of fans. You try to get as much of their money as possible. You try to keep offering them new crap. And if it's something with a big enough fan community, that'll work. That's not a bad business model to just continue to service the super fans. So that's one area where Netflix will. But to get back to something that you said, Dylan, a little while ago, is one of the reasons I was concentrating on that Friedel woman, and you mentioned the ridiculousness of having someone that broken running HR. That's one of the reasons I was interested in her, because in Netflix and all these caps and quota systems, they were putting these broken people in these positions of decision making. And once you do that, I make the point in my column like 2 weeks ago, in the old days of the Hollywood studio system, where all those old Jews ran the studios, they were unsentimental about everything. They only cared about the bottom line. If you were a fellow Jew, but you started losing money for them, you were out on your ass. Mm-hmm. That's gone now. These broken people making these decisions don't know about the bottom line, don't care about the bottom line. This woman, this Friedel woman, all that's in her head is race, 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 race. She's a guilty white woman. And that's one of the things that you see in her older tweets. She's a Christian white woman from the Midwest who is racked with guilt about everything. She hates her mother. She tweeted just a week ago, just last weekend, she tweeted about how she was triggered into having a traumatic episode because of Mother's Day. She tried to block every app that might have sent her a Mother's Day message. I mean, just as part of it's like Happy Mother's Day to our subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
But one of her apps sent out a Mother's Day message, and she
has a nervous breakdown
for the whole weekend. Yeah. These are the kind of people making these decisions.
These are the type of people deciding whether or not you get a job. Yes.
Yeah.
And whether the company gets to function because she's deciding who's going to be operating the company. Yeah.
It is taking what always worked, which was those cigar chomping Jews who didn't give a shit about anything but making money. And that's what built Hollywood, and that's what has always kept Hollywood going. And these Jews would always, whatever the next big thing is, they find a way to capitalize on it. When like blaxploitation movies started in the 1960s and ghetto movies, we got to get in on that. And that's why you watch all the like Superfly and The Shaft and Black Caesar and all those films. The producers are always Schoenstein, Feckelberg, Lipschitzenberg. They get on everything. When the Martin Scorsese's and the Michael Ciminos and these young blue-collar Italians came up in the business doing those hardcore blue-collar films, and the Jews were like, yeah, we got to get in on that. That's what the people want. So there was always the mind towards what is the next big thing that people are going to want to see in large numbers. And now these people who only think about race from their own broken childhood perspective, of course the business is tanking. And we will see as the year progresses if Netflix and the other companies can pull back from this brink, or whether they're not smart enough to do so. And any collapse can go worse. Netflix is at least still alive, but if they want to push it, they can collapse until they die, until they just end. Nothing is too big to fail. Anything in theory can fail. And Netflix, as I said at the beginning of this, they don't have anything to fall back on. They're not selling lawnmowers like Amazon. And they don't have 60 years of classic films like Disney, and they don't have theme parks. So Netflix is the one that is most at risk. We will see over the coming months what they do, and I'll be very interested in revisiting this in a little while and doing an update.
Well, I was going to say we would be very interested in having you back on for the analysis because, like always, we learn. Is learn the right word to use? We dive down deep into something that I've had superficial information on, and you're able to go like, oh yeah, here's the inner workings of Netflix that tie into Hollywood and why better. I don't know how you're figuring all this stuff out, or what you're watching and reading to get all the information, but it's great hearing it.
It comes from being at the ground level.
Yeah.
When I'm being first in casting, and then for many years when I was David Stein, I was an independent film producer. This is all ground level stuff, not from a godlike position, detached from everything. You get down to the ground level. If you want to find out about hiring procedures, know a lot of actors. Don't read Variety. Don't read Hollywood Reporter. Know actors, and you will know what the hiring procedures are. So a lot of it has to do with just being immersed on that ground level part of the business where you actually see, if you're a farmer and you want to know how your crop is doing, you walk among the wheat fields. You walk among it, and you don't sit halfway across the country reading status reports about it. You got to be there on the farm, looking at the soil, holding the soil, looking at the nutrients, whatever the hell farmers do. I don't think
I'm in Hollywood, dude. I don't know what they're doing.
Dirt in their hands, yeah. Whatever you do, talk to the animals, talk to the cows. But you got to be there on ground level and see it from that perspective, and that's what gives you a perspective that you don't get if you're kind of up in the clouds and not seeing the real effect on people.
Awesome. Well, David, once again, we super appreciate you coming on and telling us the hilarious and awesome stories. And this, so David's with Taki's magazine, which is what's the website?
TakiMag.com.
TakiMag.com. Go check out his column. It's great. And I mean, I think it's even better when you come on here and talk about the column. So that's great too. And thanks for being on again. This has been Dylan Moore and Nima Majur of iRead It TV, and we'll see you next time.